It may not be Thursday. Granted, we were going to do it on Friday, but the best episode of the week from last week is this week. Michigan Mailbag, your questions answered, coming up right now.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Tuesday to you all. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I am your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. Better late than never, getting to last week's mailbag, and we are doing it now. We will still do a mailbag this week, but it will be a weekend affair. So plan for that, barring me having to be on any field turf or anything stupid like that. So let's start with our leaders and best, starting with James Crudup at James Crudup 6. What are a couple of things that you thought were essentially guarantees that didn't end up happening? What did you think almost had no chance of happening that ended up coming to fruition? Can be team or recruiting. Wow. That one is going to take me a moment. It's things that didn't end up happening. I mean, certainly, there have been players that it was like, oh, they're coming. And even Naji Harris. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that name. Things like Naji, things that I was guaranteed, like I was guaranteed Xavier Worthy was going to work out. And I'm not afraid to tell you now because he's not with the program anymore. I was told that by Josh Gaddis. Remember how I tell you guys a name that every single one of you knows? Josh Gaddis reached out to me and said, hey, just so you know, there is nothing that is happening with Xavier Worthy. He is all set. He is all good. I don't know why people are freaking out. Zach Charbonnet staying, but that was more of him getting home. And when everyone was saying, oh, he's going to transfer, the USC message board, at that time, Zach Charbonnet's like, I ain't going nowhere. But then he got home to Los Angeles after a COVID-shortened kind of bad year. It had nothing really to do with it, but it was more of the, you know how it's gray and gloomy in Michigan throughout the winter. And if you lived in Southern California, it's no clouds in the sky, sunny, just about every single day. He got back home, and then after like a week or two, talked to his family. I was like, you know what? I think I want to stay out here. So I think those are some of the best ones there. I feel like I'll have to sit and think about it a little bit more, and we'll maybe make that a show this week. Because that's just a loaded question, and I'm sure I'm not giving it any kind of due diligence. But those are two things. I know I've talked about them before, but I was told multiple times by multiple people within Michigan that Naji Harris was happening, and then it didn't end up going that way. I was told at one point Shea Patterson was not happening early before it completely switched course. Like there was like a nope, we have no interest at this moment. When it just started kind of bubbling up, and then suddenly it was like, oh, you know what? Just kidding. That was from pretty close to Harbaugh too. So yeah, that's probably the best I got for you in the moment. I'll try to think on it and maybe do a show later this week about it. My brother Michael Wolf at MWolf21. What happens to Michigan if Harbaugh's prediction is correct and 4 assistant coaches get head coaching jobs and they lose all the guys to the NFL draft? That would be an enormous change to the program. Well, you better hope you retain JJ McCarthy, probably. Maybe not the biggest deal because, you've got other quarterbacks on the roster. You got Jaden Davis coming in. You can always go to the transfer portal, all those things. But you know what? That's the type of quality problem that top flight programs have. Alabama's constantly had that issue, right? Like the coordinators that helped win the first national championship are several removed from the ones that ended up doing it, right? Like you've seen, Steve Sarkisian and Lane Kiffin and Mike Loxley and, Mike Loxley and Josh Gaddis there together. I mean, you've seen Kirby Smart. You've seen there's been a ton of turnover, right? Like we've seen assistant coaches go from Alabama elsewhere as well. Georgia's starting to have the same problem. They've got two different coordinators. The only one that really didn't have that type of turnover really was Clemson. Of the teams that constantly and they just finally did last year, right, with Brent Venables and Tony Elliott both leaving. It's the type of problem that you have when you're a top flight program. But here's the thing: Jim Harbaugh hasn't really had issues with assistants for the most part. His assistants have generally been very good. It's just now he finally found the niche of having guys that can coach as well as recruit. I'm sure he would be able to go and find other guys, and I'm sure that there's some that are within the program that could be elevated and things of that nature. So I don't think it would be necessarily dire. It might make for one bad year. And when I say bad year, I'm looking at like 9-4 type, maybe. It might not even be that bad. Heck, you might still you might be in the Ohio State situation where you're just good enough where you're just going to win. You might just be there. We don't know yet. You might just be. Jimmy Whitner at Jimmy Whitner 1. Who would you say is the fastest player you have seen when you were down on the field? I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell. I know that sounds weird. It's really difficult to tell. I wouldn't say that I would have thought DJ Turner was, but by his 40 time, he might be. As far as just closing time, Jabril was certainly up there. I think that he would be one that would get in consideration. Jordan Lewis would probably be up there as well. Nico Collins. Yeah, I think Nico Collins would certainly, and he had a 40 time that apparently was really good, but Nico Collins would be one that I think that it's just like we watched him just kind of glide effortlessly, but I don't know that I have a definitive answer, unfortunately. Number 2, I'm going to the Nebraska Netflix logo team. I'm wondering if that's that must be a Twitter thing. I'm curious to see if I can look at that real fast. I don't know if it will let me. I'm way deep in here in my thing here. No, it's actually a Netflix logo team. Okay, fair. Fair. You thought it was an emoji. Any suggestions for places I should check out? I don't know. I just ended up going to a sports bar. I didn't explore Lincoln. I mean, just downtown Lincoln's really cool. I just pulled in in an Uber, said looked at one sports bar, said that place looks cool. Let me go in there. They were showing the Red River rivalry game. So I went in there and sat there and watched the entirety of that game while working. It was great. Just downtown Lincoln. It's got a lot of sports bars and stuff. It's just cool. It's like brick buildings, brick road. Number 3, how is Zuri? Let's see if we can get her on camera. Zuri, do you want to come up here? Yeah, because she's under me as always. For those of you who watch, here is a puppy. Maybe you can see her, depending on the with the new overlay, if that probably precludes her a little bit. But for those of you listening, you probably can't hear her. Maybe you can. She is standing here on my lap. That's how she does. She's good. She's getting a lot more walking now that it's warm out, and loving life as far as that's concerned. So thank you for asking. And moving on, KRTF Farmer 84. Besides Penn State, which road game will be the most challenging this year? I mean, probably Michigan State. And I know that they're not necessarily a team that looks like it's going to be great, but the problem is Michigan tends to let its guard down in that game. Now, I don't think that'll happen this year, especially based off of what happened in the tunnel. And they might be really bad, but especially by the time that the two teams play. But I think it's a mental challenge, and you have to be prepared for the extracurriculars that they're going to have. I would imagine they're going to double down on some of that. It's going to be Michigan State. No one else is going to have skin in the game in the same way. Number 2, I would say Maryland, because it's sandwiched in between Penn State and Ohio State. Josh Gaddis is going to want revenge for something, and I think Maryland's going to have a pretty good team. So emotionally, Michigan State. The lack of emotionally, I would say Maryland. Jonathan Joseph, J. Joseph, 2156. What's your go-to recruiting network? I know you used to work at 24/7, but you still look at the other 3 major ones. I will say this. Steve Lorenz is my mentor. Steve Wiltfong is the reason that I have a career in this business. I think that they are the best of the best. However, I am a subscriber to On3, a paid subscriber. I don't think you can go wrong with either of those two. Let me just put it that way. Spencer Whitmore, at Spencer Whitmore. Thanks for the segment 1 bump. It's sad how much I care. Maybe I'm underthinking it, but I don't see games on Peacock that big of a deal. An entire year is $20 right now, still cheaper than going out to a bar or to a game. I mean, I think the reason why people are upset about it is because never before had you had to subscribe to like a separate service, right? Like Big Ten Network, if you lived in Michigan, you got that with the cable subscription. You didn't have to pay extra for it. ESPN, you get that with a cable subscription. You don't have to pay extra for it. ABC, Fox, you don't have to pay extra for it. So that said, we're in a brave new world. Things are going to change. Of course, Peacock and NBC are going to put Michigan as the first game because they know that's going to get people to subscribe. Right out of the gates. They're not going to put Maryland and versus Minnesota. I don't know what the first game is, but they're not going to put those teams out there. They're not going to have Rutgers versus Stony Brook as the first game. They're going to have Michigan. That says a lot about Michigan. All right, we are going to continue on. We are going to continue forward, and we're going to do that here in just one moment. Before we do that, make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. The great thing about the FanDuel app is great promotions every day, the safe and secure app, and you can get paid instantly, the most important thing. There's no better place to bet on all of the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. It's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, so I don't know if we're going to do 2 for Tuesday today. It might be. I'm getting this a little bit later. I forget that I have a meeting at church on Tuesday mornings now. So I forget that that kind of pushes my day back a little bit. So might be 2 for Wednesday. Nonetheless, we're going to try to really make up for last week for missing those shows. That's the hope and the goal. Whether that comes to fruition remains to be seen. Y'all know me if you watch or listen regularly. Things never go as planned, but that is the hope and the goal. I do have different things to talk about and continuing to add more as people share what they kind of have in mind. Going to our Victor's Valiant Gym at Gym in the North. How does Iowa look next year with Kate at the helm? Best in the West. I mean, I think it would be Iowa or Wisconsin. It depends on how fast Luke Fickell, Phil Longo, how quickly they can turn that whole ship around. And also, how does Brian Ferentz deploy Cade McNamara and Eric All? How much was Spencer Petras, how much the system hamper him or he hamper the system? We don't know, really. I thought Spencer Petras looked pretty good when he had Amir Smith-Marset. I think it was a different offensive coordinator then, though. So I think it's a possibility. Iowa, you kind of feel like every couple of years you're going to get a really good Iowa team, and every couple of years you're going to get a really bad Iowa team. They lost some guys that I think were really good. Not having Jack Campbell in the middle, that's like an irreplaceable type of guy. But their defense will probably still be really good because Phil Parker knows how to coach defense. Offense, all depends. How much do they open it up? Eric All, Caleb Brown, those are, Cade's used to one weapon, adding another one, and Caleb Brown, maybe it ends up being pretty good. Or it just is. No real way to tell. Anton Sasmita Mangala at Sasmita Mangala. Wow, I butchered your name just because I couldn't open my mouth. For future playoffs post 2026, how important will it be for the other networks not named ESPN to have broadcast rights to a portion of the playoff? Do you see something similar to the Super Bowl where the college football championship game rotates between networks each year? Yeah, I think that you hit it right on the head. I think it's important to decentralize it. Like I think it's been fine for the 4, but at the same time, it's like I don't think, I think we've seen that ESPN hasn't necessarily meddled too much. Maybe they did a little bit, like getting Ohio State in, but it was obvious that Ohio State had to be in at that point, despite the blowout loss to Michigan, because the other teams that could have been ahead of Ohio State didn't hold up their end of the bargain, But they put Cincinnati in there and all of that stuff. I don't think that they're necessarily controlling things the way some people might say they are as far as getting all the, getting the favoring matchups. But I do think it's important to have that type of parity, especially just for the sake of the feeling that everything is going fairly, Mark Zemke at Mark_Z_. Changed it up, I believe, or I just didn't notice it before. June is great for hypotheticals. Take me through the possible scenario where Peyton O'Leary becomes wide receiver number 1 by midseason. Well, I mean, we've seen it with guys like Ronnie Bell. No one would have thought going into 2019 that Ronnie Bell was going to be the best receiver of a group that had Donovan Peoples-Jones, Nico Collins, and Tariq Black. Yet it was Ronnie Bell who led the team in receptions. Michigan loves the underdog receivers. Grant Perry, I mean, he was a 3-star and everything, but Grant Perry was a highly used wide receiver under Jim Harbaugh, right? Like, he likes the kind of guys that are going to fight for it. And if he has the work ethic and makes plays like he did in the spring game, I mean, he absolutely could be the wide receiver number 1. Cornelius and Roman are very good. Roman has had his injury issues week 5, like we've said before. If he doesn't stay healthy, well, they need someone else to step up. How do the freshmen do? I mean, Darius Clemens didn't light it up in the spring game. Tyler Morris didn't light it up in the spring game. Peyton O'Leary was the only one who did. So it's possible. I think it's anybody's game at wide receiver, to be honest. Perry Mitchell at Perry Mitchell 08. As a fellow Red Dead fan, I'd love to hear which protagonist is your favorite of the series and why. Let's see. Well, I can't go series. I didn't play the whole first one. I played like the first couple hours of it. I had to get I had an Xbox. I hope Trent Noop's not listening to this. I had an Xbox One. I don't have it anymore. So I had to get one where it was like made for Xbox One and start playing Red Dead 1. The problem was it was when I had roommates. I was in Ann Arbor. We shared that. It was on the TV that we shared, which the other roommates basically used 99% of the time. So I didn't play it that much. Hard for me to necessarily... It's been a couple years now since I played Red Dead Redemption 2. I mean, Arthur's obvious... Not Arthur. Yeah, wait, Arthur. Main character? Arthur? Do I have that right? I can't really remember the names either. I remember the main guy. I can remember John. Yeah, Arthur. Because I was like, wait, that's Dutch, right? Dutch is essentially the villain along with the other dude. I don't know that I had a favorite. I mean, I just liked playing the main guy. For me, it was less the characters and more of the detail that went into the locations and just all the different things you can do. It's like playing Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I kind of feel like, like this is great. You can do anything. But it's kind of still like a low rent Red Dead Redemption 2 in a way, because that was cool because it had the reality factor. So I don't know, favorite game, I think, period. That and Horizon, Forbidden Dawn and Zero West, or did that backwards. You know what I mean? James Kovalevsky at Coach_Kovo. Outside of Ohio State and Michigan State, who would you say is Michigan's football's next biggest rival? I know the Penn State game means a lot these days, but is there anyone else you can think of? I mean, it's Notre Dame. I know it's not on the schedule for a while, but it's Notre Dame. Penn State will say unrivaled, but they talk mostly about Michigan. I think Michigan's probably Penn State's chief rival in many ways. Ohio State also is in that conversation, and I know their rivalry game, quote, rivalry game is currently against Michigan State, but they are, quote, unrivaled. Illinois certainly looks at itself as Michigan's biggest rival, even though they don't play that often. I mean, most of the Big Ten does. That's just how it is. I learned that in college. Every team, you know, you go tailgating and you meet some opposing fans, and they'd be like, "Oh, we're playing a rival," and be like, it's the mixture of Thanos and Don Draper of I don't even know who you are. So, but it's Notre Dame. Notre Dame is the number 3 rival. Ike Hamlin at Hamstand87. Did anyone ever tell you Ryan Day is kind of the perfect Halloween costume for you? Just bring a baseball base. I hate you for saying that. I know everyone's been saying that lately. I asked Sarah, and Sarah said, yeah, you actually do look very similar. It's not just the beard, it's the eyes, all that. I hate you all for it. Ruining my life. Actual question, will we be at Minnesota this year, and how excited are we for the Little Brown Jug? I don't get necessarily very excited for Minnesota. I will be there. I don't know that I'm excited to go to Minneapolis, just because I think I've told y'all before, I almost got shot when I was there. At least I was in the very close vicinity to gunshots. It would have been coming from no further away than my neighbor's house, which is like a small lawn and driveway away over there. But I'm excited to go to TCF Bank Stadium, or whatever they're calling it these days, with people in it, because there was just no people in it. So there's that part. Finishing us out in segment 2, I'm not the one at William Cawthorn 9. Rank these coaches, Bo, Jim, and Lloyd, and why you rank them where you rank them. I'd have to go Bo, Lloyd, then Jim. Bo, because he set the culture. You know what? I'm gonna reverse that. I'm gonna go Bo, Jim, and Lloyd, exactly in that order. Bo, because he set the culture. Michigan was floundering. I mean, it wasn't really, really floundering, but it went from being mixture of bad to okay to beating the best Ohio State team at that time of all time. I mean, that even he set the culture as far as just the a winning culture for Michigan. That wasn't something that it was for 20 years ish. Jim, because Jim took over a culture that was losing and reset it at least back to Lloyd Carr standards, which is harder to do than when you're Lloyd Carr and you're taking over a program that, yes, mediocre Michigan, but it was still pretty set up, as far as wins. I mean, 8-4 was pretty regular, and he got it to a national championship within 3 years. And then the latter half of his career, it was just kind of back to mediocre Michigan, maybe a little bit worse off. So unfortunately, that's what I got. What are your thoughts on the state of college athletics? That's I don't know. We'll see. I know that's a cop out, but I mean, that's a long wind. That's like a segment question, but I don't think that. I think at the moment, college athletics is at a divergent path, and it hasn't necessarily chosen what path it is. So I can't necessarily give you a very good answer. That's like a 3 years down the road type answer. You know what I mean? It's just not. It's moving in that NIL direction. It's got the transfer portal. It's starting to feel Wild Westy, but it's not fully the Wild West yet. Does it rein itself in, or does it go the whole sport is Miami? Don't know yet. All right, we've got more questions coming up here in just one moment. All right, we got 5 more. A couple people, 3 people would normally be in segment 2, but we had to put some people in segment 3. So sorry about that. Starting with Rich Nelson at Rich Nelson 1. Who do you think finishes higher in the Heisman voting this year, Joe Milton or JJ McCarthy? I mean, I'm going to go with JJ. Joe Milton had essentially a really good game in the Orange Bowl. I don't know. I think the offense is probably better for him, but he's been in the offense for a while. Has it clicked on permanently, or did it click on for, I shouldn't say a game. He had the last third of the season or so with Hendon Hooker out. But I think Michigan's not necessarily going to do a heck of a lot per se, but I think that Michigan will have a better record than Tennessee. I think JJ will be put in better situations overall than Joe Milton. And I think that that's going to make it so, because keep in mind, and for the most part, it's kind of the best quarterback on the best team is what the Heisman ends up essentially being for the most part. So I'm going to go JJ McCarthy personally. Nothing against Joe. I still talk to Joe Milton every now and again. Shane at Seamus0914. Who do you think wins the wide receiver 3 job, or will it be more of a rotation? Same question with RB3. Wide receiver 3, I think it'll definitely be more of a rotation. I mean, actually, honestly, both of them are going to be more of a rotation. I think it just depends on if you're going more for the slot type. I think it's going to be like, as far as like you getting a quick underneath, I think it's going to be Tyler Morris. If you're running more verticals, I think it might be, it could be either Peyton O'Leary or Darius Clemens. And I could see someone like Carmelo English setting up. But I think it's going to be less about having a dedicated third guy and more about the matchups and the play call. Same thing with running back, the third running back. I think that it could be CJ Stokes. I think we saw Khalil Mullings really take the role and run with it. So I would expect him. And Benjamin Hall, I think, is going to be your short yardage. But, I mean, we're so far away still. I'm not really 100% sure. But I wouldn't imagine that. We know who the first 2 are in each. I think those are cemented. Kind of. Wide receiver is a little bit more open. It could be any number. Clark at Blue for Life 8. Do you know if the coaches and players enjoy the documentary that followed them in 2017, and if you think it could happen again in the next coming years? Never really heard much about it. I think it felt. I don't think they'll ever do it again. I'll put it that way. I thought it was great, not just because I was in it. Just every now and again they show a gaggle, and I'm there. I am standing a good, 30 pounds lighter than I am currently. But I don't think that they did. I think if they would have won, they would have liked it, but because they didn't, and things were kind of a little haphazard here and there, especially with the quarterback situation. I think that they went into it thinking that it was going to be stepping up from 2016 to some degree, and they took a big step back, and I think that probably hampered it. There was just the injuries and the drama and all of that stuff. I mean, great for Amazon, terrible for Michigan. Armchair Insider McGiver 420. Are we worried about the orgy hitting the transfer portal next year? I don't know why you would be. I mean, he's right there to potentially take over if JJ does leave. And if not, he's right there if JJ gets injured, because he probably, as much as we talk about Jaden Davis, Alex Orji's right there. And I think that he's probably in the most prime position to be that guy. Not to mention, like, he is the most built quarterback I've ever seen. Dude looks like a defensive end. It's crazy. Not just a linebacker. He looks like and I'm not talking like a Mike Morris 300-pound defensive end. He looks like a Jalen Harrell style defensive end. He's got options. I don't think Michigan's too worried about guys leaving the way that they were either. I think that was one of their issues. So concerned about guys transferring that they try to make everyone happy, and the team just didn't. All right, finishing us out, Brandon Jones at Old Brando. Both of Michigan's playoff losses included very poor starts that they could not eventually overcome. What do you attribute that to, and does Michigan's man-ball approach hinder them when all comes to playing from behind against elite opponents? Well, I mean, they were pretty close to come to it. What the Georgia game was insurmountable. The TCU game wasn't. Their slow start was hubris last year. The year before it was just Georgia. I think it's difficult if you try to read too much into those two games as if they're the same just because they're both the college football playoff. One was Georgia was just better. It was evident during warmups that Georgia was going to be better. The TCU game was self-inflicted wounds, bad play calls, bad coaching, mistakes made. It was a little bit of everything. Uncharacteristic mistakes, offensively, defensively, across the board. They were there. There were plays there for the taking. Missing tackles on Quentin Johnson. Stuff like that, like on defense. The second half wasn't suddenly like Michigan always clamped down in the second half. Didn't do it. They went with more of a, pressure Max Duggan and hope he makes a mistake when they pressured him. And when he's halfway down, he flips the ball out to a guy who evades a tackle and runs in for a touchdown. That happened like 3 times. I would have played more of the Ohio State, keep everything in front of you. They didn't do it that way. All right, that's going to do it for us with this episode. We will be back either tonight or tomorrow. Not 100% sure. Depends on how the day goes. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We will talk to you again soon. Peace.